Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for attending our conference, our virtual conference. Today we have Stefanie and Carrie Hoffman presenting for us. Their presentation is anything but that, how to help your child struggling with mental health condition. Thank you so much for being here. The floor is yours.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eugenia. All right, so seeing your child struggle with a mental illness is painful, confusing, and terrifying for any parent. And mental illness can affect your child's ability to learn, maintain healthy relationships, and achieve developmental milestones. And all too often, parents either don't recognize the signs or attribute them to something else because of stigma.
When I was a child dealing with mental illness, I wasn't thinking about developmental milestones. Although these things are important, when you're battling mental illness, you're far more focused on your social circle and how you're viewed by others. You're worried about fitting in because you don't feel like you can fit in anywhere. And in a group of adolescents, mental illness might be perceived as being weird, and it makes you unapproachable. I couldn't talk about how I felt because I feared that no one would understand.
So in our presentation, Anything But That, How to Help Your Child Struggling with a Mental Health Condition, we'll start off with some statistics. We'll then emphasize 4 main steps to early intervention: knowing the warning signs, communicating concerns, developing strategies to promote wellness, and accessing resources.
And as you might have gathered, as we talk about each of these elements, we'll provide context by sharing our own personal experiences.
So first, a little bit about who we are. I'm Stefanie Hoffman. I'm a content marketing manager at a tech company called Splunk. I'm a member of the board of directors for the San Francisco chapter of NAMI, and I regularly speak at high schools, universities, and businesses through NAMI programs such as Ending the Silence, Parents and Teachers as Allies, and NAMI at Work. And you might have heard about some of these programs about the importance of mental health and reducing stigma. I've also taught a NAMI basics class. It's a class for parents of children with mental health condition. And I'm a writer. I write about mental health as well. I have a blog and I've written many articles, including one for the NAMI Advocate. And recently, I founded a neurodiversity employee resource group at my company that now has more than 460 members and counting. But more importantly, I'm the parent of a child who struggled with a mental health condition, and that really shaped who I am and how I view mental health in children. So along with valuable information, we'll be sharing our story with you.
I'm Carolyn Griesi. I am 23 years old and a mom to a 1.5-year-old boy. I'm also a senior service consultant at Wayfair. And when I was younger, I struggled with depression and anxiety and borderline personality disorder traits that was later diagnosed when I was 18. After the age of 18, I was diagnosed with bipolar and manic depressive. And at the age of 21, I was diagnosed with PTSD. I've struggled with these challenges since the age of 11, and I've been through lots of therapy, self-discovery, and many different medications. Even though I have faced numerous obstacles in my journey, I now have a set of tools and mechanisms that have helped me to thrive. I now know how to face difficult or situations and put things in perspective so I can continue to live a happy life.
So why your child's mental health matters. I'm sure you all know it does, but as a parent, you know that mental health and well-being is just critical to your child's success, like it is for any of us, and it impacts so many aspects of their lives. And I'll talk about these here. Their ability to learn, their attendance, not just in school, but in social activities and sports and extracurriculars, relationships, like peers, family, friends, school, community, physical health, emotional health, and psychological health, of course, developmental milestones that they reach throughout their teenage years, and the long-term success, which are really contingent upon those developmental milestones. So we'll run you through some facts about mental health. I know many of you are familiar with these statistics and their source to NAMI. 20% of 13 to 18-year-olds live with a mental health condition, and this is pretty congruent with adult statistics. 17% of high school students seriously consider suicide, and 50% of 8 to 15-year-olds with a mental health condition don't receive treatment. So what do these statistics mean? We've all heard them. Carolyn, can you actually talk about these statistics from your perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. So to me, these statistics mean that there are so many people that are not being heard. Even though there are so many children dealing with this, it's still taboo and not socially accepted. When I was struggling as a teenager, there would be times I would try to vocalize what I was experiencing, but at the time we didn't have the information or the language to articulate it. You don't feel like you can just walk up to your parents and say, I want to kill myself, and they don't have the information to see the red flags. We're screaming with our actions, we just can't vocalize it. And instead, it comes off as defiance or being overly dramatic or being a bad kid rather than the fact that we're dealing with so much more.
So something I want to talk about is the average delay. The average delay between the onset of symptoms and treatment for children is about 8 to 10 years. And this might seem like a lot, but in reality, when you take stigma combined with lack of knowledge about children's mental health in general and lack of access, the statistic isn't that surprising. A lot of this is attributed to stigma, as you might imagine. In general, many parents are reluctant to admit that their child might have a mental health condition. I know I was, particularly or primarily because I thought somehow I was responsible and that somehow it was my fault that my daughter was struggling. A lot of parents want their children to be soccer stars or prima ballerinas or science fair winners. They don't want to be bringing their child to therapy because they have a mental health condition. And a lot of times it's because they think it's a reflection on them and their parenting. That's compounded by the fact that it's challenging to diagnose children because of changing hormonal issues and brain chemistry. So from our perspective, up until Carolyn was about 14, she was one of those adolescents who didn't receive treatment. And it's not because we didn't want to. I saw signs when she was maybe around 11 or 12. And I saw my daughter exhibit extreme behaviors like irrational anger and slamming doors and withdrawing and isolating and getting into fights and later doing things like cutting. And I put her into therapy, but therapists would tell me that this behavior was attributed to a lot of reasons like the divorce or teen angst. One therapist told me she was angry because I made her go to a museum against her will. And it was amazing how many people, including people in the therapy community at the time, would attribute her behavior to anything other than mental illness and try to normalize what really was abnormal behavior. So there was a lot of stigma around mental health. But I also began to question if I was just overacting. I felt and I thought I knew that as a parent, something was clearly wrong. But so many others would tell me that this is normal behavior. And I just really began to question myself. And also, as her behavior progressed and I did try to get her psychological evaluations, I was often told that behavioral health centers didn't accept children under 18 or that there was a 30 to 60-day waiting period. I thought, oh my gosh, and in that time she could kill herself. And when she was in crisis, this was just unacceptably long. So overwhelmingly, stigma coupled with lack of access prevented us from getting treatment early on. Carolyn, how did you feel when therapists told you that you probably didn't have a mental illness? Did you believe them?
Yeah, I did believe them. I didn't want to believe that I had a mental illness either. I knew that I was feeling something so much more than anybody else was around me. I was angry all of the time, but I blamed so much of that on the environment, which did play a factor, but I realize now that I would have been experiencing those feelings and emotions regardless.
So we'll talk about, the risks of not intervening, and there's some statistics that correspond to that. Sadly, there are many negative repercussions for not intervening early, and here are a few of the most serious. More than 90% of youth who die by suicide have had a mental health condition. 70% of youth in juvenile justice systems have a mental health condition, and that arguably might be a little bit low. 50% of students over 14 with a mental health condition drop out of high school.
So these statistics just reiterate the fact that this happens to so many children and it's still not being prioritized. It's very difficult to get adequate mental health care, especially for children under the age of 18. I believe that if mental illness was less stigmatized, we could treat the symptoms at earlier stages, which would lead to higher success rates for treatment in general, both in children and adults later in life. Thankfully, I was one of the lucky ones. I went to a behavioral health facility at the age of 14. Now, this was challenging, of course, but the path that I was headed down wasn't a good one. Without treatment, my chances of graduating high school, for instance, were very slim. That, among several other benefits of treatment, have opened so many doors for my future. I don't believe I would be where I am today had I not had the tools that were given to me during treatment. Now, these tools can also be acquired through therapy or medication. It doesn't have to just be treatment. Everybody's journey is different, but battling mental illness and living a healthy life shouldn't be as hard as it is.
It definitely shouldn't. Although for us, it sure was. I remember when my family and I were trying to get Carolyn evaluated, we were calling different behavioral health centers and they were telling us that they don't take children under the age of 18 or that 60-day waiting period, like I mentioned. And then finally, someone gave us a tip to take her to the emergency room to get her evaluated and that they might be able to fast track her then for her assessment. So given that we had no other option, we did. Carolyn was actually having an episode on that day. And luckily the emergency room doctor saw that she was experiencing a mental health crisis. And also very serendipitously, the head psychiatrist in the adjacent behavioral health center happened to be in the emergency room that day. And the doctor said to her, "We have a little girl who really needs your attention." And she was able to get us an appointment the next morning. Ironically, at the behavioral health center that had told us previously that there was a 60-day waiting period. So we got lucky, but access to treatment shouldn't be about luck or privilege for that matter. So now we're going to talk about the 4 steps to early intervention, and we'll talk about all of these in depth throughout the presentation. First, know the warning signs. Knowing what to look for is a big first step, and often there are more than one. 2, reach out and share concerns. And that might mean with a therapist, a teacher, your partner, or other parent. It also might mean with a child struggling with a mental health condition. Develop strategies to promote success and wellness. These take time, but it's always better to prepare ahead and consider a range of potential outcomes. And 4, reach out for resources and support. You are not alone and you shouldn't have to walk this path by yourself. So first, know the warning signs. Children with mental health, with a mental health condition or mental illness experience constant, unrelieved, and challenging symptoms. And this was especially important to remember when you're wondering whether or not they might have a mental illness. Now, first, if you suspect your child might be struggling with a mental health condition for any reason, it's always best to get it checked out by a professional. And as parents, we know that teenagers can exhibit a lot of different behaviors that are congruent with mental illness. Their hormones and bodies are changing, and they can be moody or emotional, or even experience depression or highs and lows at times. What distinguishes normal teenage behavior from the possibility of mental health condition? Now, I'm not suggesting this is how you diagnose, which clearly should be left to a professional, but these are a few things to keep in mind when you're gauging whether to take them to a professional for further assessment. Intensity. How severe are the symptoms? Are they consistently exhibiting severe reactions or reactions that are extreme for the situation? Like, for example, when I told Carolyn to do her homework and she would scream at me and slam doors. And that happened all the time, not just once in a while. Duration. How long do they last? A day or two is one thing, weeks or months is another. And then level of distress. How much do these episodes impair daily functioning? Does it prevent them from socializing with friends or impede their schoolwork? With Carolyn, her struggles really hurt her friendships and they really impaired her schoolwork as well. So now we'll go over the warning signs of a mental health condition. And there are many, these are many of the symptoms and signs to watch. And while the presence of 1 or 2 by themselves might not indicate a mental health condition or illness, they might indicate the need for examination or warrant further attention. Feeling very sad or withdrawn for more than 2 weeks. Severe out of control behaviors. Sudden overwhelming fear for no reason. Severe mood swings that cause problems in relationships. Drastic changes in behavior, personality, or sleeping habits. Extreme difficulty concentrating or staying still. Intense worries or fears. Not eating or throwing up or using laxatives to lose weight. Repeated use of alcohol or drugs. And trying to harm or kill oneself or making plans to do so. Carolyn, can you talk to these warning signs when you were struggling as a teenager? Which ones were the most severe and how did they manifest?
Yeah, so I pretty much had all of these, but for me personally, one of my biggest warning signs or something that I really struggled with was being angry all of the time. And I think about things like my 14th birthday party. My mom threw an Olive Garden for me. And this was during a mental health crisis right before I went into treatment. And if I wasn't experiencing that crisis, that should have made me happy, but it didn't. I just felt angry and even more withdrawn from reality. And I felt even more angry that nice things were being done and I was in turmoil and I didn't feel like it was fair. But now I know as an adult, it was my mom trying to pull me back into reality and to reach me. But unfortunately, I was just too far gone at that point.
Yeah. So from my perspective, you had most of these. Carolyn would isolate, withdraw from me, shut herself in a room. She always seemed to be angry, like she mentioned, and she would scream, "I hate you," and slam doors when I asked her about doing her homework or really anything, any kind of chore, any task. And she shut down and just didn't want to talk to me, and she couldn't stay still, and she'd be very fragmented. And we did get her a diagnosis early on of ADHD. I knew that she was getting in fights with her friends, and there always seemed to be a lot of drama around her. And although I wasn't aware of suicide attempts per se, she was cutting and had scars on her arms and legs. And as a parent, I was so confused. I remember when my daughter used to be like, and at times I saw these glimpses, but I was heartbroken and sad. I missed her. I wanted to help her. And yet when she yelled at me, especially after I was trying so hard to help her, I would just bristle. I would not be a good communicator. I would yell back and I would shut down also. And basically we couldn't understand each other. So we couldn't really connect.
And I just want to interject, being a parent with a child who has a mental illness, it's hard, and you're still human regardless of you being a parent. You're still human, and you might yell back or you might bristle or anything, but you have to just remember to pick yourself back up and to keep moving, and apologize when necessary, and to just let yourself mess up, let yourself be human. You don't beat yourself up as a parent either, because your child will see that and they'll feed off of that.
Thank you. That's important to remember. So that's a good segue into our next section, communicating concerns. Communication is so important. And as a parent, it's already hard to talk to teenagers. We all know that, but that challenge is compounded when your child has a mental health condition. So I learned as a parent that there are ways you can communicate that are more effective than others. And it's not always easy, but we'll talk about what ways work and what ways aren't as effective.
So first, learn about the illness. Do your homework, get educated about what's going on so you know how to articulate it. Understand what it entails and what behaviors you can expect, so you're not taken by surprise. Listen without judgment. This means putting aside all of your advice and just trying to understand your child. You don't have to be a problem solver. You don't have to have all the answers right away. Oftentimes your child just wants to be heard and talk. Validate your child's feelings. Respond in ways that show that you see and hear your child. Saying things like, "That must have been a terrible experience," or "That must make you feel very afraid." That way you show them that they're being validated and it's okay to feel that. Ask questions and be curious about what they're experiencing. Say things like, "How does that make you feel?" or "Can you tell me what's going on for you?" I know that if I had these questions, if I was asked these questions, I would have had a lot to say. And praise your child's strengths. Chances are they're feeling very afraid or unworthy or experiencing really low self-esteem, especially if they're in school. Show them that you see all the wonderful things about them, and that this illness or condition doesn't define them, and it doesn't diminish their strengths or who they are as a person. Reassure them that you love them and that you're there for them. Oftentimes, a mental health condition brings up an array of emotions, and having a mental health condition can sometimes make you feel like no one loves you, or that you're unlovable, or that you're hard to deal with. And even if they know that you do love them, it doesn't hurt to show them that you're going to be there for them for the long haul. And it also helps to know that they can't do anything to lose your love.
Awesome. Sweetie, can you touch on what would have helped you when we were struggling to communicate with each other?
Yeah. So I think that my feelings being validated would have helped me a lot. As I said previously, it really helps to know that it's okay to feel that, because a lot of times your feelings, you don't think it's okay to be feeling these things, or you feel guilty for feeling these things. And I think just knowing that it was okay would have opened up a lot of communication doors. And learning about the illness is important too, because we as children don't really know what we're experiencing. We don't really know what's going on. And I didn't know what was going on when I was a kid. And we just know that we feel terrible. So if you learn about the illness, then you can begin to educate us about what we're feeling. And that way we feel like it's written down. It's not abnormal. And then, if you tell us about the illness, we can maybe begin to just understand that ourselves. But all in all of these are important. All of these would have been important to me as a child too. It's really just a matter of how you approach it and what your specific situation calls for.
Thank you. Perfect. Thank you. So as we talked about, there are ways to communicate more effectively. There are actually ways to avoid when you're communicating with your child. If you want to effectively reach them, especially when your child is struggling or in crisis. And clearly that's when good communication matters the most.
So first, accusations. Avoid accusations. You're just going to skip school again, aren't you? For example. Passive aggressiveness. If you don't get your grades up, sure, flipping burgers for the rest of your life is a good profession. Kind of sounds very condescending. Making you statements like you always do this, or you always say this, or you always make that excuse. If they're always doing something, might be something that's part of the problem and that needs attention. And letting your emotions get the best of you or losing control. I know that my mom touched on this a little bit. Did you want to touch on that a little bit more?
Absolutely. So, when I was, when Carolyn was really struggling, I was a single mom. I was, working a full-time job. I was trying to get her help. And she knew how to push my buttons. And, a lot of times when she was in crisis or when she was angry, I would get angry too, and it would erupt in a fight, and I'd end up saying things I regretted, and there'd be a lot of yelling and slamming doors. And looking back, what I really should have done is taken space. I should have just calmed down, stepped away. There are ways we can handle that when we feel so angry, when we feel so upset. Going for a walk, watching a TV show, cooking something, just finding ways to take space and calm down, and then coming back to whatever it is you're talking about in a kind of a rational, way when you're ready to actually have a conversation. So those are things that that we experienced, and looking back now, I can wish I had handled differently.
And losing control is just, it's unproductive, and it definitely escalates the situation, and it doesn't help your child. And at the end of the day, your child's a child and you're the adult. And, definitely as an adult now, I know how to handle things. And I've taken so much from my mom saying, take space. And now as an adult, I take space. It's great. So pity also to avoid is pity. Oh, you poor thing. Oh, that looks so sad, or something like that is pretty condescending, and we can see right through that. And platitudes, saying I understand when you don't, or using filler statements that are not sincere. We definitely see that. It's unproductive.
Absolutely. So now this is a little bit of a harder topic. But no parent wants to hear that their child wants to end their life. Yet sometimes this is a reality. And so here are some ways to address this very critical situation.
So first up, so I know my mom mentioned before that she didn't know of any suicidal attempts or anything like that, but there were plenty of them. And one of the things that actually benefited me was removing means of harm, such as guns or knives or stockpiled pills. Can't tell you how many times I went into the bathroom and looked in the medicine cabinet for something to take just to stop feeling what I was feeling, and there wasn't anything. And I don't know if she did this on purpose or not, but there wasn't anything available to me, which saved my life on numerous occasions. Calmly ask simple and direct questions, such as, can I help you call your psychiatrist? Rather than, would you rather I call your psychiatrist, your therapist, or your case manager? Those kinds of direct questions like that can relieve anxiety. And a child that has a lot of anxiety, they're going to struggle to make decisions when they're presented with those kinds of, array of options. If you give them one or the other, or if you give them a direct question, it really helps relieve that anxiety. Talk openly and honestly about suicide. I know this is a scary one, but please don't be afraid to ask questions, such as, are you having thoughts of suicide, or do you have a plan on how you would kill yourself? Therapists use this, everybody uses this because it's so helpful. It puts that on the table and gets it out in front of you, and it actually can help to snap your child back into reality, to say, well, yeah, I've been feeling suicidal, but then you can begin to ask why. Or our next point is ask what you can do to help. Generally, when a child is experiencing suicidal ideations, it's not the fact that they want to kill themselves, it's the fact that they want to stop feeling what they're feeling. I know that that was what I was experiencing. That may not be true for everybody, but it generally is that. And then don't argue, threaten, or raise your voice. And we've touched on that so many times, but just to kind of reiterate, it's very important. Escalate, it only escalates the situation. And continue, to be continued. Don't debate whether suicide is right or wrong. Again, we know it's not right. It's just a matter of wanting to not feel so horribly and wanting to stop how we're feeling and feel better. It's kind of a white flag, so to speak. If your child asks for something, provide it. As long as it's a reasonable and safe request, provide it. I know that my mom put me in, I would wake up one day and I'd say, I want to do piano, or I want to do pottery. And these things she could provide, and they were reasonable, and they gave me an outlet. Now, they didn't necessarily pull me back immediately, but they definitely helped. And for a child who is struggling, that may work, by giving them an outlet or a hobby or something to channel their emotions into that is positive. And if your child is having hallucinations or delusions, be gentle and sympathetic, but do not get in an argument about whether the delusions or hallucinations are real. Whether they are real for you or not, they are very real for the person that's experiencing them, child or not. And last but certainly not least, if you're concerned about suicide and you don't know what to do, call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. That's 1-800-273-TALK, 1-800-273-8255. This hotline this lifeline is so powerful and helpful. I've called it even as an adult, because I was experiencing high emotions and suicidal ideations as an adult, and they have always been there to talk and help. And whether you're the one experiencing those suicidal ideations or you know somebody that's experiencing them, they're always very helpful and very readily available to assist you and give you any advice possible, or just to listen, if you just want them to listen.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So moving on to developing strategies to promote wellness. So there are steps that we can take to help our child receive treatment and provide and sustain wellness and help them with their condition. And we'll talk about these. So first, talk with your pediatrician or physician. A medical professional is a good place to start when you have mental health concerns. And it's also likely they have knowledge of your child's medical history. Keep a record of concerns, and that means documenting aberrations in their sleeping or eating history or mood and behaviors. And this will allow you to see trends over time and have a written chronology that will help therapists, teachers, and other professionals really understand your child's illness. Get a referral to a mental health specialist. And this can be done through an individual education plan at your child's school. And we'll talk about that more in a little bit. Work with the school. Help the school understand what your child is going through. A good relationship with your child's school will create a foundation of support for both you and your child, and can really supplement the documentation and help therapists better determine treatment options. Maintain regular communication and help teachers understand your child's challenges. Your teachers often see your child around 8 hours a day, and if you can, try to keep them as allies. They might be some of the strongest advocates when you seek treatment. Connect with other families, and this is a big one. It can be really healing to connect with other families who share similar experiences. I think one of the hardest things about being a parent of a child with a mental health condition is that, well, you're busy all the time and you feel completely isolated and you feel completely alone. And that's really hard, but connecting with other families who share those experiences, you realize you're not alone. You realize that these these shared stories, these shared experiences actually are much more common than you think. It's also likely other families can help direct you to resources that you may not have considered. And then finally, NAMI basics class or support groups, that you can get through, your church or other nonprofits or organizations. The 6-week NAMI basics class, and it's given often once a week over a period of 6 weeks, is dedicated to helping parents of children with a mental health condition navigate all aspects of their child's illness, including communication techniques like the ones we've talked about here, or various bureaucracies like the Social Security Administration or the juvenile justice system, and the education system, others that you'll likely encounter, as well as mental health resources. It's a great class. So one of the things we touched on earlier was how to reach out to teachers. This is really daunting. It can be really intimidating, especially since you don't know how they'll react. But like we mentioned, your child's teacher or teachers can be some of your biggest allies in helping you navigate their illness, but you need to establish lines of communication. So here are a few ways you can connect with them. Share your concerns. It starts by a simple conversation. I love to talk to you about some of the things I'm seeing in my child. Chances are, if you're seeing these things in your child, your teachers have seen, or their teachers have seen it too. They, like we mentioned, they spend around 8 hours a day or so with your child. And chances are they might not know how to bring it up, or they don't know how you react, or if you get defensive. So just saying, this is what I see in my child, just really opens that floodgate for communication. Ask what teachers see in school. Again, this will help open up the door for genuine communication about your child. If you're coming from a place of curiosity rather than, anger or defensiveness. And it also might help your child know that you're going to have a unified front with your child's teacher, and they can't, kind of play one against the other.
I just want to interject really quickly. So this is really important because as a child with mental illness, I did this. I definitely played my teachers against my mom, and it did not benefit me, neither in school nor at home. And neither my teacher nor my mom knew what was going on in either place. And I got away with a lot, and I got away with things that were really detrimental to both my schoolwork and just my mental health in general. And if I wouldn't have done that, or if we would have known that it was okay to create that kind of united front between my mom and my teachers, that would have been, I want to say, less.
That would have been helpful.
It would have been very helpful.
It would have been helpful.
So I'm sorry, Mom.
Hindsight's 2020. Also refer to academic indicators, things like declining grades or lack of attendance or other concerning behaviors. The data always can speak volumes. Establish communication channels like email or folders, phone, text, social media even. There's so many ways to connect to teachers now. Just find ways that works for both of you. Ask about classroom adjustments, and we'll talk about more in the following slide. But there are many learning accommodations that schools can actually make for children with various disabilities or mental health conditions. And this could relate to schedules, how they take tests, or something of that sort. Be upfront about what your child needs and find out what's available. And really, the more open and honest and transparent dialogue that you and the teachers have, the more likely it is that they will be able to really understand your child's condition and be able to accommodate. And at the end of the day, they really do want to help your child succeed. Preferential seating. This could be something as simple as being put in front of the classroom or near a window to help them focus, or maybe away from other people who are talking. That can make a huge difference in how your child focuses and learns. Things like flexible homework assignments. This could be something like flexible due dates or an alternative assignment if it more is more congruent to the way your child learns. There again, talking about what your child needs and how they learn, and helping your teacher understand that. Chances are the child's teacher is dealing with at least 20, 25, sometimes 30 students. And they have a lot of things, of people to that they're responsible for. So making sure that your child's needs are known is very helpful. And then finally, special education plans, like the 504 plan or the IEP. And we're going to talk about that on the next slide.
And before we move on to the next slide, I just want to kind of reiterate the fact that teachers are more than willing to help, especially if you're very upfront and honest and open that door. They want to see your child succeed just as much, if not more than you do. That's what they're there for. That's their profession. And, you know, chances are that you know, since they are seeing this in classrooms and in their classroom, they're going to want to, you know, to provide that kind of those kinds of accommodations to help every other student as well focus, because if your child's acting out in class, they're going to want to accommodate them to be able to make it a better learning environment for everybody.
Absolutely. So we'll go into mental health resources. And as we mentioned previously, there are different education plans that your child can have access to, and you and your child can have access to, and they're both very complex. We don't have time to go into the details, but we'll give you a quick overview of what they provide. So one's the IEP, or the individual education plan. It's under the Special Education Individuals with Disabilities, under the Department of Education. It's offered to those who have a disability that meet criteria under Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA, or someone who has a disability that significantly impacts educational performance and or requires specialized services. So it can be a little complex. So it might take some understanding, you know, some research to understand, you know, what it entails. Age limits, the IEP is offered through 12th grade. What's included? Specialized education services, accommodations, and related services. And where is the plan used? It's used educationally through 12th grade, but it can't transfer to college, so grade school.
And I can go ahead and present the 504 plan.
Sure.
So type of law, it's the civil rights. It's with the Civil Rights Rehabilitation Act of 1973. The department is the Office of Civil Rights. Eligibility, it is offered to those who have a disability and impacts life functions. And this also varies differently by state as well. And what is included, it entails accommodations and modifications depending on the condition. And the age limit, there is no age to apply or to qualify for the 504 plan. And where this plan is used, it applies to school, work, and college. 504 plans can transfer to college.
Perfect. And so here are a list of quite a few mental health resources from organizations that you can access, and they're available online, and we can put these links into the chat as well. You might be familiar with many of these. They cover different aspects of mental health and mental health conditions or neurodiverse conditions. And then finally, of course, who to contact? NAMI National, of course, NAMI California, and there are hundreds of local municipal NAMI affiliates all over the country. I chose San Francisco because I'm closest to NAMI San Francisco, but there are hundreds all over. So find one that's closest to you. Chances are there will be one closest to you. And with that, that concludes our presentation. Thank you so much for attending, and we are happy to take questions.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Stephanie and Carrie. I appreciate you guys giving this informative information to our viewers. Thank you for being part of our conference. I certainly appreciate it. Thank you so much.